everybody. This is Paola Guthrie from Creating Purpose with Paola, and I welcome you to the Spanglish World Network and Heart Network on Single TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download Single TV, the app on the respective app stores. When you download it, rate it. Single TV is totally free. You can find it in Google Chromecast and Amazon Fire TV Stick, Roku Stick, and all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. Thank you all so much for being here today, because today in the house we have a very special guest. His name is David Maples. He is a mental alchemist who uses mindfulness, and I welcome you to the house, and I appreciate you being here and saying yes.
Yes, thank you for having me, Paola.
Oh, you're so welcome. Please share with us what is a mental alchemist.
Yeah, so drawing on the traditions of alchemy just in general, right? And that the tradition is transmuting base metal into gold. Well, mental alchemists, what I talk about is transferring pain and suffering. What I mean by suffering is the resistance to what is, and transferring that into awareness and consciousness. So through mindfulness, right? Because mindfulness is all about being present without a judgment, without biases, and those kind of things. So we talk about mental alchemy is transmuting those lower vibrational energies into higher vibrational energies.
And how many of us are on there? And then, we have experienced the resistance of what is
Right.
all
That's what
through
the
our
Buddha says.
lives.
That's where this all suffering comes from, is right. Is attachments, and then the resistance to actually what is. And what is more insane, quote unquote, than to actually resist what is actually in front of us? But we do it all the time.
Yes. And sometimes we're stubborn and we bathe in our own, suffering, and how important it is to be aware. One of the
Yeah.
examples I've shared here, David, on the show is because I don't have sisters. To me, sisterhood might have a different definition than someone that has five sisters, that grew up with five sisters.
Sure.
Maybe to me, I'm stuck to the idea of this is what sisterhood is to me. But if my best friend does not follow the guidelines of what sisterhood means to me, then I'll be in pain all the time, right? But if I
Yeah.
learn to understand what the definition of sisterhood is to her, and then together we can learn to have a good time if we value each other's friendship. Same thing with a marriage, like
Sure. For sure.
here we go again. It's like sometimes we're stuck and it's like it has to be this way because that's how I grew up. But maybe the girl, your girlfriend might say no, like it has to be this way because that's the way I grew up, and we're stuck in that resistance, and it's
Yeah.
painful
Right.
versus discovering what you're about to share with us. So how do
Well,
we?
well, I was going to say, you said before we go there, you touched on a very kind of fundamental aspect of what I do with my clients, right? Is that resistance because you have an expectation of what sisterhood or marriage should be based upon your experiences, what I call conditioning, right? And so a lot of us are unaware of this conditioning because it is the veil in which we filter the world through. And so, since 95 cognitive or neuroscience tells us that 95% of our cognitive activity is below the subconscious, below the consciousness, right? In the subconscious world. So, our conditioning, that's where our conditioning lives. So, to your point, if you've got a definition of sisterhood or marriage that has been formulated usually from like 0 to 10, we're very young, then we project that idea out into the world subconsciously, and then we run into somebody that doesn't share that same view. That's where the resistance is. That's where the quote unquote suffering is, because now here we are expecting a situation to arise as we've been conditioned to believe. Then we meet resistance, and then that's where we say, oh, I don't like this. It should be a different way. So we're resisting reality, and that's where our suffering. That's what I mean by suffering. I mean, because there's that famous quote where pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right? So the physical pain of something, I'm not saying that that's not the reality. It's the suffering that we create around what we think should be and what actually is. So that's I love that you started with that, because that's where I start with all my clients, is in the conditioning. It's having awareness enough to break through, even to understand that you're filtering everything through conditioning. And so that's why I say most people are reacting to things rather than actually actively and consciously choosing something. So it's a great place to start.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to share this for our beautiful audience who are parents. Like my son's birthday, one of my son's birthday was May 31st.
Okay.
And we had, we had to, we were planning to have a sleepover, like it had to be during the week or something like that. So it's our options were limited, and just to say. So whenever he finds out some of his friends have summer school, they could not
Mm,
spend the night during the week. So he comes to me and here we go. The pain and frustration. You could see it in his eyes and his tears, like we're dropping. I was like, okay, like because I know this. It's like, okay, I said, well, can you find three solutions? Just think about three solutions that we can come up with to continue to celebrate your birthday the way we were planning to, but maybe at a different time. So
sure.
here, it's like here's where we are aware. And in this case, I was aware because I'm the mom and I have the experience. And we were able to turn that pain and suffering within like minutes. Figuring out the
Yeah.
possibilities of how that we can continue to celebrate, have these friends over, but at a different time. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I cannot wait for you to teach us, because we can not only implement this in our personal life, but also with our loved ones. We can also help our loved ones with these tools.
Absolutely. Well, and I think
Yes.
you touch upon something that I really am passionate about is that relationship with parent and child, right? Because how many of us wish we could go back in time with the knowledge we have now, right? And educate our younger selves or pass on wisdom to our younger selves. Well, I assert that's what parents get to do with their children. It is a copy of you in a younger version. So you get to bestow all your wisdom and knowledge to this younger version of yourself in real time. So while it's not you, it is a copy of you that you get to mold and shape and treat as if you wanted to be treated at that age. And that's where we start to break that conditioning and raise that awareness, is instead of passing along the conditioning that we were brought up in, it's like, wait a second, if I was, how does your son get 12?
12, he turned 12,
Right.
yes.
So at 12, how would I want to be treated? How would I want to be seen? How would I want to be heard? How would I want to be cared for versus just passing along the conditioning that we have been brought, that we were given at 12 years old, which may have not come from the most empowering place. Because if you think of our parents' generation, right, a lot of them were raised in an environment of fear and scarcity, where it was literally you had to fight for everything you had, and you had to keep a hold of everything you had because it might have been taken away from you at any moment. Well, that's not the world we live in anymore, right? But if we continue to pass on that conditioning, all we're doing is passing along all of those fear and scarcity models that were passed along to our parents. So that's a great intervention to step in and say, wait a second, what are three things we can do, right? Because now you're breaking his conditioning of like, oh, this is terrible. I can't believe this happened. What is, but now I can't have the party I wanted. It's like, well, sometimes what we want and versus what we get, it's vastly different. And what we get may be infinitely better than what we thought we wanted. So it's a great,
Yeah, so please dive in, get pencil and paper, because I'm ready.
yes.
So,
Okay.
so share with us, the five foundations that
Yeah.
it would take us from that suffering to that time engagement. And I cannot wait to dive into the time engagement.
Perfect. Yeah. So the way I kind of started this whole process was, so I'll give you a little background. So I was in the corporate world for 22 years at the same company. It was a staffing company. And when I started the staffing company, I was, let's see, 23 years old. I didn't even know what staffing was, really, to be honest with you. And the only reason I took the job was because it paid $1 more than this other job I was going to get. And then fast forward 22 years later, 15 different roles. I was a VP, and I was in a position where I was asked, what is it you want to do? And I was like, that kind of froze me because I had been there for so long. I had tried all these different roles. I didn't really have an answer. So as I started looking to see what it was I wanted to do, and I knew that at this point in my career, I wasn't as fulfilled as I thought I'd be being in the role that I was in. And so when I started to look kind of externally to see what I wanted to do, everything that interested me, I didn't have the experience because I'd been at the same company for 20 years, or I didn't have the education. And I was a psychology major back in college, and I didn't pursue the master's and doctorate and all that kind of stuff because it didn't resonate with me. And so when it came time to seek what I wanted to do, I stumbled upon coaching. When I say stumbled upon coaching, I was kind of searching different jobs and kind of what it was interesting me, and coaching kept popping up. And so as I dug in a little bit deeper into coaching, I was like, I think this is what I was looking for in college, but it wasn't really available because back then it was like Tony Robbins on info commercials talking about how to better your life and those kind of things, which was great. Don't get me wrong, I love Tony Robbins, but I didn't know what the heck he was doing at the time because I was only 22 years old, 23 years old, didn't know. Uh, so when I made this jump, it just coaching made sense to me. And so I went through my certification program with CTI, which is a great program, and got the certification also through ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation. So with those two kind of certificates in hand, I went out to the world and said, okay, I'm a coach, I'm ready to go. So I stumbled upon mindfulness as well, and I had never had a meditation practice. And what really got me into it was the book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, was Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And in the back of that book, it has this meditation practice that he encouraged you to do for 30 days and stick with it. And I had never done a meditation practice. So I started it about 2 years ago on my birthday. So it's been about 2 years now where I meditate probably 6 times a week now. So pretty regularly. And so as I started doing these meditations, I started to kind of unlock all these inner thoughts and beliefs, and most of them which were self-limiting, right? So neuroscience says we have about 50,000 thoughts a day, of which 80% is negative, right? If you extrapolate that over a year, you're talking over 14 million negative thoughts that we have. In this, again, 95% is subconscious, right? So most of this stuff is running in the background. And that's where the first foundation that I talk about is conditioning, because it all starts with our conditioning. And I love to say your condition is a result of your conditioning. So rather than going out and trying to change the external world, which most of us try to do because we think it's this causation of like, well, if X is a certain way, then I'll be happy, then I'll be fulfilled. Well, what if you got rid of, not rid of, but you mitigated some of those 80% of those negative thoughts, and you started to believe in self-empowering beliefs and self-empowering notions of, or ideas of yourself as a potential, as a human being that we all have, right? So once I started kind of really diving into this, and really, I think in the last probably 6 months to a year, I started really diving in and really started writing every day and researching. And I was reading a book a week about just different topics and everything else. And so I saw these common themes throughout all of these. Maybe self-help books, sure, but it'd be like books like Atomic Habits or Rethink or Drive, which were kind of like focused on how to create a stronger mindset, more kind of in the business world. But then I started going into the spiritual side of things as well. And Dr. Joe Dispenza does a really good job of mixing the spiritual and the science. And then Eckhart Tolle is another person that I really love because he's more on the spiritual side and talking about awareness and being present and those kind of things. So the first foundation that I really latched onto was the conditioning, because I realized how much that impacted everything in my life, of how I viewed the world, how I interacted with the world, how the world appeared to me, was because of my conditioning. And so when I started diving into this a little bit more, to give you a little bit more background, I was adopted from Korea when I was about 4 years old. My brother was 10. Prior to that, our birth father was very physically abusive, and I had the scars to prove it when he came over and all these kinds of things. And then my adopted dad, he believed in corporal punishment, right? This was the late 70s, early 80s. So if we did something really bad, we got the belt, we got the switch, we got all these things, right? Nowadays, it'd be considered child abuse, but back then it was just discipline. So it was like, it wasn't a big deal. It's just kind of what we did. Well, as I started digging into my conditioning, I realized how much of my filter was based in fear, but didn't really realize it. Because if you knew me, if you talked to me, I wasn't a fearful person. I wasn't somebody that cowered in the corners. I was pretty extroverted as far as when going out. But the filter which I saw the world was always this kind of cautious, protective mode, because it was based in fear of, if you do something, if you step out of line, you're going to get whacked, right? Either metaphorically or literally. So that was the first tenet I really started diving into. And once I understood how much fear was ruling that, and it filtered how much I viewed the world, then it was the next foundation I dive into is awareness, right? Because once you start breaking into that conditioning and you raise your awareness about that subconscious level thinking and the negative thought patterns. And so let
Can
me
I
step
can
back.
I
So
can I
of
ask you a
course.
question? Okay. And this is just pop up because I talked to a mom who adopted some beautiful set of
Okay.
siblings, and some of them had to work through trauma
Mm,
through their teenagers years. Did that
okay.
happen to you? Did you have some sort of awakening, or did you have some sort of, you were trying to supplement a certain trauma during your teenager years that you were
No,
conditioned?
for me, it honestly, it didn't really hit until I left my corporate job, because it was growing up. My dad was so strict. He was an ex-military person, so it was, if you didn't follow his rules, that was it, right? So,
Uh-huh.
um, for me, I just did what I did because that was just what I thought I was
That's
supposed to do. Right? I
you were
mean,
expected. You
you're
respected
expected
him
to
so
do.
much, and and
Well, it's
you followed.
respect and a little bit of fear, right? Because of like of what would have happened. But yeah, but ultimately, I was a good boy. I did all the things I was supposed to do. I went to college and got my degree, got a good job, bought a house, got married, did all these things that I was supposed to do. And then once I kind of stepped away from the corporate world, I got divorced in 2015, and then stepped away from the corporate world in the middle of pandemic 2020. So those two kind of major life events, I think, was what led me to this like revealing. But it was always in the background of my mind. It was like, gosh, there's something more. I feel like there's something more that's out there. While I was outwardly successful, inwardly, I wasn't fulfilled, and I couldn't understand it, right? Because I checked off all the boxes that I was told to check off, but yet I was still left lacking. So for me, it didn't really happen. And everybody's journey is different, right? So for me, I was so conditioned and so in the world of fear and lacking and scarcity that I didn't even know to question it until later on. And that's, for me, was kind of the big, like, oh my goodness, I've been living with this filter for so long. So that's what, yeah, for me, it didn't happen until in my, because I'm 48 now. So it didn't happen for me until my mid 40s.
And
Some
you
might
took
call it a
care
midlife crisis, but yeah.
and you took care of your dad. Well, he was sick, right?
Yeah, so in the last 6 months, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 bladder, liver, and bone cancer in early January. But before that, he and my mom moved in with me because they were an hour away from healthcare, and I was an hour and a half from where they were going. So I said, "Why don't you move in with me so we can be closer to healthcare?" And he ended up passing away on April 29th. But those 5.5 months that I had with them living with me, as I got to establish a brand new relationship with them that would have never happened if it weren't for the situation, right? So I got to have these conversations with him, and one of my favorite conversations I got to have with my dad. You got to remember, ex-military guy, very strict, like growing up, and I said, Dad, if you could go back to any point in your life and tell yourself one thing, you have 30 seconds with yourself, what would you say? And I thought he would just kind of blow off the question. And after a couple of minutes of thinking about it, he's like, you know what I'd say, son? It's like, what's that? And he said, I'd tell myself to value myself more. And that blew me away. Right. And I said, okay, how old are you when you're telling yourself this? He's like, oh, about 12 years old. I said, Dad, here's the beautiful thing. You're now 84. You can tell yourself this right now. Right. Because he was struggling to follow the doctor's orders to drink enough water and keep up his weight and keep his mobility up. And he was struggling. And part of it was because I don't think he felt he was worthy of fighting through this, right? Because if you've had anybody going through chemo and battling cancer, it is the furthest thing from easy, right? It is a struggle mentally, physically, emotionally. So, and if you don't feel like you're valuable enough, it's hard to take on that kind of responsibility. And so through these conversations with him, I got a lot of insight into kind of his conditioning, which gave me a lot of insight into my conditioning because he had just passed on to what he had learned onto my brother and I, and in his own way. Obviously, it wasn't just a copy of it, but I understood it. It allowed me to let go a lot of angst and things that I was holding against them that I didn't even realize, right? So through these conversations, it was kind of like, so that was a great window into my conditioning, which then helped me raise my awareness.
Yeah, and now like let's invite all of our beautiful parents who are here with us to remind their kids that they are worthy. They
Worthy,
are worthy
yes,
because I see it. I see it on, in our kids. Like I can go back to my 12-year-old. He's like, why are you
yes,
upset? Because you think I did something wrong. And I'm like, we're here to learn,
yeah,
with our mistakes, but you are worthy. It's like God
yes,
created you. You're amazing. And
yeah,
every time we mess up, we learn from it and then we move on. But it's like, don't take it too hard. And it's
yeah,
the beautiful message that you're sharing with us that, he told himself at 12, he thought when I was 12 years old.
yeah,
How many of our beautiful children need to know that they're worthy, even if they didn't pick up their clothes, even if
yeah,
they didn't do what they told them they should do, they still need to know that they're loved, their value, that you
yeah.
love them, and that they're a beautiful creation. So
Well,
thank
that's
you.
and that's. I mean, you're hitting right into you're right, flowing right into perfectly into awareness, right? So part of awareness is being aware of the words that we use, not only with others but with ourselves, right? So when we say things like, "Oh, I'm not good enough for this," I'm not worthy, or we may not say those things directly, but it's this underlying current, right? And so, and then even when we talk about our emotions, right? Oh, I'm depressed. No, you're not depressed. You're feeling like you're depressed. You're feeling these states, but that it's not who you are, right? But as soon as we attach these emotions to who our identity, right? Then we get stuck in that identity of depression, of sadness, of loneliness, or whatever the emotion is. Even on the positive side, oh, I'm happy. No, you're experiencing happy. You are not happy. You're experiencing happy, right? So because and so that's a big distinction in understanding, because I love the quote. It says words are not only descriptive, but they're also creative, right? So by you saying I am happy or I am sad, you're not only describing your state, but you are now creating your state, right? So that's a key distinction to remember. It's like if you once you identify yourself to a certain state, to a certain thing, to a certain place, you're limiting yourself because now you've identified yourself as that one thing or those two things, and now you're closed out to every other emotion that's out there, right? So when you say I'm feeling sad, that hits so differently than I am sad.
And we as society only choose like five different emotions, I believe. If correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we use happy, sad, angry. I don't remember the other two, but it's like we're very simple, and we have so
Limited,
many,
yeah.
we have so many emotions to choose from, but whenever our vocabulary only chooses like five.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's five main ones that we kind of associate with, right? Then there's ancillary ones that are more nuanced, I guess. But yeah, for the most part, and I think it's a sign of kind of how we are as a society is we want to label and categorize everything. It's like, holy cow, we don't have to do that. And by the way, it's such a fleeting state. It's like, why do we? What makes us so compelled to identify to a state that can change in a moment, right? It's like, so that's, I mean, that's to your point. That's where that's a form of alchemy is, right? You're changing. When your son was talking about having that birthday party and he was so upset and he was like now able to switch it, that's a form of alchemy. You took a situation where he was suffering because he wasn't able to, like, accept what was real. So he was suffering, and now you say, well, let's come up with three different ideas. Well, there's a change in there that is very subtle, but how profound is that in the long run? Where now, next time he runs into a situation, rather than kind of spiraling in and saying, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening," it's like, "Why me?" or whatever else that we tell ourselves, we go, "Well, wait a second. If I come up with three different things, then I could have what I wanted, and it may even be better." Right. So that's a form of alchemy that we're talking into. So that awareness is that key for me, is part of it, is the language that we use. Once you start really monitoring the words that you use, not, like I said, not only to others but with yourself, and that's where mindfulness comes in, is how much can you recognize the ideas and thoughts that you're talking about and telling yourself without judgment, right? Without any kind of biases, without any kind of judgments, to be able to sit back and really kind of ascertain what it is, what story are you telling yourself on repeat mode.
Yes. So going back to like creating with our words,
Mm-hmm.
like let's go back to say it's like I'm happy. Like if I'm experiencing happy,
Mm-hmm.
uh, if I say I am happy, and then I didn't understand what goes after that.
Yeah, well, so when you say I am happy, that is you're identifying as happy instead of I'm experiencing happy, where that is, it's not you that is, you are not happy, right? You are
Is
you,
I'm creating I'm choosing. Is that what
right?
it is? Like I am like I choose a lot of the times to be grateful. Like like I'm grateful. I'm grateful and joyful for this. Like thank you. Even in my small meditation, where it's like thank you, thank you God, thank you God. So I guess you choose. Okay,
Well, but
okay,
to your point though, even though you're saying I am, and those are very high vibrational states, right? Gratitude and joy, those are high vibrational states, and we all want to experience that, right? But we are not those things. We're not joy. We're not gratitude. We can express gratitude, we can experience joy, but as soon as we attach ourselves to any state of emotion or any label, like when we say, if you say, "Oh, I'm a host for a show," well, no, you are a being that hosts a show. You are not a host, right? Because what were you before a host, right? You were all you still all are you. But when we attach ourselves and say, "I am X, Y, or Z," versus "I am feeling," or "I'm experiencing," or "I am," or instead of saying "I am," is saying the I experience X, Y, or Z instead of I am X, Y, or Z, right? Because you are not a host. You just host a TV show.
okay.
You see the
Yes.
difference?
Yeah. Okay. So you get to create the experience with the words. Is that what is that?
You're describing the experience versus who you are, right? When
Okay.
you say I'm happy, you're describing you as an entity versus I experience happiness. Because now, look, you're not attached to the situation or the idea of an emotion as being
I get
you.
it. I see. I see. I know what you mean because
Yeah,
I read the book called The Untethered Soul. What is
that's,
that? You
you're
yeah,
welcome.
yeah.
Many great thanks. Yeah,
Yeah, I get it now because you are supposed to, like let it pass, like the wind, even if it's good or bad, you let it
right.
pass so that you can continue to enjoy every moment of life. I get it now. Okay, I get
Okay.
it. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so our beautiful audience, for some of you that might be like, well, what is he talking about? Well, in life, if we learn to let things pass by, we were able, through science and research, and there's books out there that shows that we get to enjoy and live life at a higher potential, higher, uh, you know, energy. Like, yes, it's like, I'm here, I'm grateful. And it's like, if my kid kissed me this morning, and here we go, here's a good one. Like, my daughter yesterday told me, "You're the best mom ever," you know and for a moment I doubt it, and I'm like, don't
Mm,
doubt it, just enjoy it. So I enjoyed it, and then through the day that phrase came to me, but then it's like I let it go. It's like it was just a moment. So it's like you let it go so that I can continue to enjoy her laughter, her love,
mm,
her you know what I mean, the way she expresses herself. Because if I get attached to only that word, then I'm missing out on life. If I'm missing out, it's like, oh, she told me I'm the best mom in the world, you know. And
Yeah.
if I live with that phrase, then I'm missing out my husband. I'm missing out this interview right now. I'm missing out my other kids' expression. So I mean, that's my interpretation. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, that's perfect. And the other aspect of that is you don't allow for every facet of being a mom, right? Nobody is the best mom in the world all the time, right?
Yeah.
We're emotional, we have our ups and downs, we have life that gets in the way. So if you attach to I'm the best mom in the world, it adds kind of this pressure of like, oh, now I have to be the best mom all the time. So if I can't say this, or should I say this? It's like, no, you're just a mom, and your
You just,
expression of being a mom in that moment is the best that you can be in that moment. Because look, our best isn't always the same. And this is what we walk around with, this fallacy of like, I have to be my best today. And that means I have to be 100%. Well, sometimes your best is 40%. Sometimes your best is 10%, right? But that's the best that you could be right now. But when you attach to this any label, right? But most of us, unfortunately, attach to these labels, or I'm not this type of person. I'm not a technology advanced. I'm not an extrovert. I don't like to do this. And so you get attached to that label, and then you limit every other possibility because you've already said, I am this. Well, it says who, right? And when. So that's the whole key, is like it's understanding that it is a fleeting moment that doesn't define you. It's just your experience in that moment of being you in that moment. I mean, it sounds so esoteric, but it's like, but that's it. Once you could get past the idea of anything as being a lasting impression of you, is because everything is fleeting. In our thoughts are fleeting, our emotions are fleeting, our experiences are fleeting. So the only thing that we have to be able to focus on and hold on to is right now. And so how often has the great mom in you also become the frustrated mom, or the upset mom, or the whatever mom, right? Those are all facets of you that are experiencing being a mom. And not one is better than the other. They're all part of the experience. But once we hold on to one part of that experience and attach to that label, we discount the whole rest of it as being not a good mom. Well, who says who? So
yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Yes, thank you. Because sometimes, how many of you right now in the audience might be dealing with, oh, she told me I was incompetent, or she told me I didn't do a good job. And that was 10 years ago. You're still, get a
Yeah.
hold of it. And
Yeah.
that's what awareness is. Oh, I'm holding this, you know, just let it go. Let
Yeah.
it go so that you can continue to, you know, experience the beauty of life. Because sometimes we just look at this, you know, like we look at, oh, they told me I wasn't enough, but then you don't see the beauty of you on the other
Right.
side because you're just looking at what they told you, and you got a hold of
Right.
it, but you have to just learn to let it go, like the wind.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So the next, like, so we go from the conditioning, then we start to break into that awareness, and the key part, from like I'll say it again because I think it's so important, is our words, right? And then from there, those we start to understand our beliefs. And I don't mean I believe in Bigfoot or I believe in aliens, those kind of things, right? I'm talking about our beliefs of our core self, right? Of how, are we worthy? Are we good? Are we capable? Are we smart? Are we not? All these things that run in the 95% of the subconscious, right? That have us react to the world according to our beliefs. And so once you start breaking into the awareness, then, or once you start raising awareness, then you start to raise your awareness into your core beliefs. And there's this person, Zach Mercutio, on LinkedIn. He's a professor at Colorado, and he has this great quote. It's like, when you feel like you don't matter, then nothing matters, right? So I kind of converted that into the quote I have on my website. Is, it's not how much you want to change that matters, it's how much you believe you matter that affects change, right? Because when you believe you matter, then you take steps into, like, doing this, do work to raise your awareness. You do the work into becoming a better mom or a better dad. You do the work to, like, advance your career, because when you matter, now the choices and the actions that you take affect your life and the world and the people around you, and you recognize that for what it is. When you feel like you don't matter or nothing matters, then what does it matter what you do? It doesn't matter. I can say this, I don't have to do this, I can do nothing really matters, right? So that's where that belief system is so strong. And if 80% of our thoughts are negative, most of us run in this belief system that we're not enough, we're lacking, that we're something missing, right? Because it comes down to our conditioning, where how many of us have been told, or how many parents do this now, is like, listen, child, when you do X, Y, or Z, then you'll get this, right? When you get good grades, then you'll get this. When you eat when you do your homework, then you'll get dessert, right? And so what that's inherently telling children is, I am not good enough right now in this moment as I am to receive love, acceptance, whatever it is. I have to do X, Y, or Z, or be X, Y, Z to receive that. And so that's where our belief systems start to get created. And that's why I take that 0 to 10 age, right? Is our belief systems get created at a very early age. And then here we are as adults running these belief systems that we've had since very young children. So that's why they're so hard to break. And that's why they're so hard to even recognize, because we've been running that belief system for so long. And so that's where mindfulness comes in. It says, okay, how can I step back from this and really see what my belief systems are from an objective point of view, right? Without my biases, without my judgments attached to them, right? So that's where we start. So once you get through the conditioning, get to a little bit more awareness, then you start to go into your belief systems and really see how that affects the world that you're creating literally
Mhm.
around you,
Yeah,
right?
and there are ways to break through your limiting beliefs. I'm proof of it. I thought, that my English wasn't good enough, so I had to be quiet. I would not speak. I would try to hide and like just don't see me. Of course, I had a trauma with thinking I could be deported long, long time ago. So that
Mm-hmm.
also added to it. So you can break your limiting beliefs because look at me now. We have a beautiful show that we reach around 1 million views, and I was like, no, it's like I have a voice. I have to change. Here
Yeah,
we go back to I matter. And because I discovered that I matter, how many Hispanic girls are out there thinking that their English is not good enough, that their
right.
education is not good enough. So I am a proof of what you're saying. I'm just sharing it with a beautiful audience because it's true. You can break through your limiting beliefs. I'm continuing to break through others' limiting beliefs that I have. Uh, because it's a never ending it's a never ending story. Because one example I have is like I have to learn to be an awesome mother-in-law, and I don't know
Mm,
how, right? So I have to learn to share my voice.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
here comes another one where I have to learn it anyways, and I'll be using these tools to be better at it.
Yeah. Well, and so you're leading directly into the next phase is our actions, right? And that's where so actions are the manifestation of our dreams, right? Because if you dream and you have these ideas, but you don't take any action on it, they're just ideas. They're just that, right? So until we act upon these things, nothing is really happening, right? But when you are able to step back and look at your actions mindfully, right? From a perspective, like I said, without judgment, without biases, and what you realize is how you act is a reflection of your beliefs, right? Because somebody who believes they're worthy and capable, they'll act that way. They'll go into the world with that kind of attitude, with that kind of confidence. If you believe you're not good enough, or your voice is not strong enough, or you have a terrible accent, you act accordingly, right? Because you were very quiet. So the actions showed that you didn't believe that you had a strong enough voice to be expressed. Well, now here you are, your belief has changed. So now your actions have changed and you have your own show. So that's with that. I don't know what a greater example of action that is in that alignment with your beliefs. Now, here's the thing, right? Is we can change our beliefs through actions. We don't have to believe, but here's the thing: you have to be aware enough to recognize that you have that belief to be able to change that action. And so Amy Cuddy is another author I love. She has that book called Presence. And what she talks about is power poses, where you stand like a superhero and you stand like this and you do it for 5 minutes before you go into these kind of meetings. And what that does is it's telling your body that it's okay to take the space for who you are. So when you go into a meeting, you're not, if you come into a meeting, you're cowered over and your eyes are down, people they just react to you very differently than if you walk into a meeting with your chest up, and your eyes are up, and you're looking people in the face. They react to you very differently, right? So part
Yes.
of changing your belief system is changing your actions, but it's having the awareness enough to recognize that my actions are showing people that I don't believe I'm good enough, or my actions are showing people that I'm scared, or whatever it may be, right? And now there's the other side of that is when we get to like arrogance, right? Is people are scared, but they're going to just act anyways, and I disregard people, and I'm just so focused on my thing that I'm just going to do it and bulldoze people over. And that has limiting benefits as well, right? Because you may get what you want, but at what cost, right? So that's where mindfulness can, if you can step back and you're breaking through the conditioning, you raise your awareness, you understand your beliefs. Now you're taking actions that are more in line with what it is that you believe about yourself. And so that's where I think a lot of people get stuck, myself included, was you get to a certain place in life and you feel disconnected, you feel out of alignment, you don't feel fulfilled. It's because, well, if your actions are telling people that you're not worthy or you're not good enough, but then you have this sense of belief like, no, there's something more out there, there's something going on, there's this disconnect that starts to happen. And that's where the suffering is, right? Because we're not accepting what actually is. So
Yes.
that's where it's we start to like it starts to really kind of boil down. It's like once you get to breaking through that conditioning, raising your awareness, you get to where's your beliefs, and then you start to see your actions. And then that's, for me, is where I move into this time engagement versus time management.
Can I go back
Right?
to actions
Of
just for a little
course.
bit? Okay,
Of
because
course.
sometimes whenever we take the courage and we become brave,
Hmm.
then because we're humans and we're conditioned to look for acceptance. Sometimes those
Mm.
actions don't align with the acceptance and that connection for those that you love because they were like, what happened to her? What happened to him? He probably hit his
Yeah.
head. That's not the David that I knew. What is he talking? How's he losing his, like walking away from a 22-year-old job experience, and then like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. So some people might not, go with cheer you up for your actions. And
Sure.
I'm here talking from very personal experience. Whenever I began to take those actions, David, I always tried to, because I was scared to show my voice. I was scared to be on a TV show. I was scared to do these new things that I felt like, you have to share because there's other girls like you that need it.
Yeah.
So I try to always align with love. Am I doing this with love? Am I doing it with gratitude? Is there peace when I'm doing this? It's like, so I try to align with my being my true self, being authentic,
Hmm.
but still alive. I mean, I got a hold of God. That I was like, okay, please guide me because I
Yeah.
don't see the acceptance. I don't see, people saying, good job, you're doing a good job, keep going. That I still, my calling was stronger, and I'm
Yeah.
continuing to show up because that's what I believe, and I'm doing it with love, integrity. And I ask myself, 5 questions, and if those questions are yes, I'm using my integrity, my love,
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
gratitude, then go for it, girl, keep doing it. So whenever it comes
Yeah.
to action, sometimes fear is there because if you're not going to love me, then I'm not going to do it, because I'd
Sure.
rather have your love and just be right here than grow up, because I'd rather be comfortable in love than to
Hmm.
grow and be on a space where it's like it's uncomfortable. So
Sure.
I just wanted to bring that up because this is just from very personal experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if I would have listened to my fear, then we would not be talking to 1 million people right now.
Right, right. Well, you hit on a couple. There's a couple of things that I want to dive into there, right? So I think the first thing that you really touched upon was you said, I have God in my life, and I just said, please God, help me out, right? So it's this idea of giving up these limiting thoughts and beliefs to a higher power, a consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it, right? Whether you call it God, whether you call it consciousness, whether you, what, the name doesn't matter. It's the idea of this presence, or this entity, or this energy that is higher than what your limiting thoughts are of your beliefs and your conditionings and all these kind of stuff. So if that's part of letting go, right? It's letting go of the idea that you are not good enough. It's letting go of the idea of these labels that we attach to ourselves. And once we, because look, every label that we attach ourselves to limits us. In one way or the other, because to accept a label as us, whether it be positive, negative, or neutral, it is limiting all the other things that we can include in those labels, right? So the idea of giving that up to a whatever that is for the viewer out there, of giving that idea up to something else, right? So that is hugely, I think that's one of the big things into breaking conditioning and raising awareness and changing your beliefs, all those kinds of things, right? The other thing you touched upon was the 5 questions that you asked yourself, right? So it's now you've given up that given up the notions of I'm not good enough or whatever it was, and then you align yourself to these 5 questions. Well, my question to you then is, how did you come up with those ideas? Like when you say I'm aligned with my higher self, how did you come up with those?
Through meditation.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
through, it's like talking to God, just talking, and I'm like, okay, you want me to do this, but it's like I don't see no results, and I know you want me to go after it because I feel it, and I know you want me to inspire you, especially the Hispanic community, the Hispanic girls, to
Yeah.
know that there is more out there. But I don't see, and I was like, but I don't see nobody, standing in line saying, okay, how can I do that, And it was through a lot of meditation, talking to God, and that He gave me those 5 questions. I mean, I have,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's how.
Well, so that's great. So you were able to, in that moment, if you're giving up that label of my English is not good enough, right? Giving up that label allowed the space for those 5 questions to come in. But if you had held on to that idea, those questions couldn't have come in, right? Because there wasn't any space for that. So, like you, when I decided to make this move and I left my job of 22 years, I broke off a relationship at 2.5 years. People thought I was going kind of crazy, right? They thought, like, what is happening? Are you sure you want to do this? And, so on and so forth. But letting go of those labels that I had for myself allowed me to have this belief that there is something greater than what I know to be true right now. And that's what kept me going to move forward and keep learning and to explore. And you had mentioned something else, I think, earlier in the conversation, where instead of failures, right, we're looking at these as learning opportunities, right? So and that was kind of my mindset going forward, was, look, if I go through this and I'm not quote unquote successful, I mean, I will have learned so much more than I ever could have out of any kind of book or watching a TV show or a movie or whatever it is, by going through and experiencing this. And that's where the action, right? We're talking about this action, is going through the actions are not only help cultivating your beliefs, but it's also giving you information, education, growth, all those kinds of things. If you can look at it as look, there's no failure if you can keep going and learning from it, right? And there's that famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, right? He's like, I didn't find a thousand ways. I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just found 1,000 ways how to not make a light bulb, right? It's like, yeah, great. Or Thomas Edison, right? So if you can go through that, I mean, could you imagine 1,000 times you're trying something, it doesn't work, and trying something, it doesn't work, trying something. I mean, most of us would give up after like a couple of times, right?
Yes.
And so most things in life that are worth having are worth doing multiple times over and over, and learning and learning and learning and growing and learning, right? But if we look at it as a failure, our actions become very limited. And we can only take, well, if I have to be safe and I don't want people to judge me, then I can do these 1 or 2 things and then I'll
Yeah.
be okay, right? But how
Yeah.
many people in this world shake up the world by doing things that are not safe, that are risky, that are scary, right? And fear is just on the spectrum of courage. It's just, where on the spectrum are you going to, where do you want to take action from? Do you want to take it from the fear side, or do you want to take it from the courage side? They're both on the same spectrum. And that's where the transmutation comes in, is if you can look at fear and recognize that courage has the same exact elements in it, they're one and the same. They're just on a different spectrum of it, right? So then you start to look at, like, okay, if I'm scared, and what I love to tell people is, like, instead of scared, when you're nervous or scared about doing something, say I'm excited, right? Because most of the time when we're scared, it's because it's risky and there is a challenge and there's something to take on. So instead of focusing on just the fear side of the spectrum, if you focus on the courage side of the spectrum and say, look, I'm excited, then you start to move into this space of like, okay, if I'm excited, it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be this high energy and kind of whatever. But when we look at it as a fear, we're like, oh, well, I can't, I'm scared. I can't, where's all this energy going to be? What am I going to do? Right. So it's taking that same emotion and just moving it over on the spectrum. That's like love and hate, right? Like you can be like people that are hateful, they don't realize that it's just on the spectrum of love, but they've just weighted it
Yeah.
towards the fear side
Yeah.
versus the courage side.
Okay, where can we find you? And you're gonna have to come back. There is no doubt. I hope you are enjoying this time with me, David, because we didn't
Yes.
finish and time is up. But where can we find you?
Yeah, so you see my QR code up there. That's my website, and that's probably the best thing. Also on LinkedIn, it's just davemaples.com or Dave Maples on LinkedIn. Those are my two places where I'm the most active, and I post on LinkedIn Monday through Friday about these kinds of topics, and I did dig a little deeper into them. So those are the two best places to find me. So yeah, that was way too fast. We didn't even get to time engagement. Holy cow!
No, and that was, I mean, that's what we need so much, but we needed that those this
Yeah,
foundation. So we're gonna come back. I hope you have time. We'll schedule a time whenever you can
that'd be
be
great.
with us again, and we'll finish this beautiful five foundations that it will take us from suffering to living a more, joyful life that we all need. So,
Yeah.
any last message before we go?
No, thank you so much. And for everybody out there, everybody has their own path. So wherever you're at right now, it's exactly where you're supposed to be because that's where you're at.
Yeah, and remember that you're the only one that can give power to your talents. You're the only one that can give life to your dreams. You can watch this replay on my YouTube channel, Paola Guthrie. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Blessings to you all.